It was all over, but she didn't mind. Alea was an industry sector administrator. In this era of near post-scarcity, in this period of history where human prosperity reached heights previously impossible to even conceive of, this sector was but one of thousands, tens of thousands more like it, devoted to the insatiable drive of the human industrial complex. Yet on this day, on a day seemingly like many others, the administrator would see her last morning cycle. She volunteered for this. She wanted to send a message, a clear-cut declaration from humanity. A message that read similarly to the UN Declaration of Sapient Rights. Humanity shall henceforth, now and forever, stand against the forces of tyranny. To whomever encroaches on the sanctity of the dignity of the sapient, know that humanity will not tire, will not stop, will never falter in our resolve to uphold these universal rights, which we hold as fundamental, irrefutable, and self-evident. Alea wasn't in the military. She had no interest in such affairs, but in a circumstance so specific such as this, she knew no one could do what needed to be done but herself. As every human was, she was willing to fight if push came to shove. This was just her way of doing so. She'd seen the horrors the Lacalets had committed on the aliens of Andromeda. The news piece had just been released not a week ago. It was with this that humanity had collectively declared war on these cosmic horrors, even if it meant their science would be distracted from their actions on Andromeda and every neighbouring galaxy to focus their intentions on that of the Milky Way. Scientists have long speculated why the Milky Way was so devoid of life. Perhaps this was it. Perhaps the Lacalets had left it in this empty, lifeless state, and Earth had developed life far too quickly for them to come back to finish the job. And so, Alea, with vintage music playing in the far distance of her lonesome station, stood in front of the massive view screens, her visage broadcasting to the rapidly encroaching Lacalets. This is Administrator Alea Vikran of the United Nations of Earth and Luna. You are encroaching on human territory. This will be a one and final warning. Do not approach us, or you and your fleet shall be intercepted with appropriate force. This is all. No response. She expected this. A part of her stirred. Her heart shuddered in places as the miasmic clouds of inky darkness continued ever forward. She knew that on board were hundreds of thousands of aliens, all suffering, all long since converted, and in perpetual anguish aboard these organic leviathans. All of them having lost their right to self-determination ages ago, now present for the sadistic satisfaction of the Lacalets. She'd lay them to rest today. She'd lay everyone who encroaches on this small chunk of human territory to rest. They were foolish to start this war. Perhaps there was a better way to approach this. Perhaps it was plain old dumb to suddenly act as the center of attention, distracting the Lacalets away from their current sadistic endeavors in the neighboring galaxies in this local cluster. But even if they were able to spare a single sapient, a single minute of torment from these sadists, it would be worth it. The sacrifice would be well worth it. She heard the announcements. The aliens were bruised, battered, and hopeless. They needed a new rallying cry. They needed an example to be set. They needed to see that the Lacalets were mortal. Little was known about the exotic materials that made up the Lacalet constructs. It was, for all intents and purposes, however, impervious to contemporary and conventional munitions, projectiles, and even direct energy weapons. Yet there was one weapon that the most exotic of materials could not hold up against. The power of the sun. Or more specifically, the power of a sun going nova. And as administrator, she not only had the ability to do so, but the authority to do so as well. Alea, another voice made itself known within her control room. Let the military handle this. Just give us the command keys and... No. Alea. I am a civil servant of the United Nations of Earth and Luna. I have an obligation to remain at my post until I am dismissed. And unless you have an order from the Quadrant Overseer of the UNO Department of Industry, then I shall remain at my post, fulfilling my constitutional obligations. The voice straightened up. Yes, Administrator. May the spirit of humanity be with you, ma'am. And to you, Captain. A single nod from the Administrator was all that was necessary, before she flinched. Her voice cracked for a moment. Goodbye, Michael. I love you. Terminate connection. Darkness started to cloud the very edges of the system. The view of Andromeda was clouded and obstructed by this unknown force. Her senses began screaming at her. Lights flashed, alarms blared, as the administrator let out a deep sigh, her eyes trained, focused, dead set on the single command line she'd written up hours prior. Everything was ready. The Lacalettes seemed to hesitate somewhat before approaching. Perhaps they noticed just how advanced their new prey truly were. An entire solar system turned into a forge of industry. Worlds gone, replaced with large stellar constructs of varying sizes and makes. Millions of ships ferrying cargo from one station to another in a series of long, unending lines, forming what can be superficially described as conveyor belts in the midst of space. The star itself was contained, placed inside what seemed to be a massive stellar engine, one that powered the whole system, one that was one keystroke away from taking them all into oblivion. Part of Alea believed the Lacalettes would turn away upon seeing this, and they almost seemed to, until they didn't. As they began approaching, swords of ships resembling undulating tentacles connected to a central, miasmic mass of darkness. So this was it. United Nations Declarations of Sapient Rights, Article 5, Clause 2. All citizens of the United Nations of Earth and Luna shall commit to the defense of humanity should the need arise, for the sanctity of the sapient, for the dignity of humanity, for the continuation of the creed of civilization. No sacrifice is too great, no deed is too small, in the upholding of this self-evident truth. I am Sector Administrator Alea Lee. UNO National Identification Number 2241251241. Today, the 21st of May, 2971, at 12:23 p.m., UNO Standard Time, I commit to record the fulfillment of my obligations to the United Nations Charter. Click. Nothing was left of the system. Nothing was left of the invasion fleet. Nothing but the commitment of humanity to the preservation of the dignity of the sapient.